Hello, and welcome to This Week in James City County. I'm your host, Renee Dahlman. Today, we are once again joined by County Administrator Scott Stevens. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, Renee, it's great to be back. Sometimes hard to get here, but always good once I'm here.
Glad to have you here. So I know that you have a lot of things going on. It's a very busy week and getting ready to start a very busy month and a half or so. So I will let you just take it away.
Renee, I think we're always busy. It's just this last bit has been talking about assessments and budget, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we get to the end of this. But I certainly want to thank you for having me back. I'll cover the board meetings that have gone on in March. We've had 3 this month, so just thought I'd run through those rather quickly. At the board's regular meeting, March 12th, they did award a contract for $130,000 for an outdoor fitness center that will be built at War Hill. Outdoor Fitness Center Court, I guess is the official title. And it was funded by a grant from the Williamsburg Health Foundation. So excited to have that underway and coming this summer. And I'm certain we'll have more conversation and publicity around that as it gets ready for dedication. But it ought to be exciting new amenity for our community. And I think War Hill's a great location for that. They also had a public hearing where they vacated a right-of-way and replaced it with an access easement on Moore Drive. It was a street that was on a subdivision map, but the street didn't really exist. And the concern was as that property develops, at least the future owners of that would have access and not have an expectation of a publicly maintained street, because sometimes these public right-of-ways end up there and the expectation is VDOT or the county will maintain them. And that we have a list of those that our county attorney and development services department are working through to sort of try to remove the public right-of-way designation and add in an access easement so the properties don't become landlocked. And so Moore Drive was one of those. They also amended a proffer for Lux Stone's Toana property. And again, it was when it was multiple ownership, the proffer made sense. And so the amendment to it makes sense now that it's one ownership of that site. And that really was it for March 12th. Sounds like it was short, a little longer than that, but that was the summary of it. March 15th, the Board of Supervisors met with the City Council and the school board and really had a presentation of the superintendent's proposed operating budget for FY25. The real issue there is the increase to the localities is pretty significant. I'll talk more about that later. But really, when the state gives a 1% raise for teachers, we end up paying about 2/3 of that raise because of the unfunded positions from the state and also from the funding formula. When a raise is given, we still pay a significant part of that raise. And so that has a pretty big impact on our proposed budget as well. And then we moved to March 26th, the board's business meeting. They did have a proclamation recognizing Boy Scout Troop 103 for 100 years of being in existence. So congratulations to them and the other scouting troops within the community. But 100 years is a long time for any troop or any group, and for that matter. And then we had a retirement recognition of a retiree, and Bernadette Williams from the fire department has really been that supply logistics person for the department, I guess, for the last almost 30 years, and really thought of as, I think we were a second or third career for Miss Williams. And I think the fire department really had a lot of love and affection for her, and that she looked after our firefighters during the day, but also if they were out at night with them. I want to thank her for her service and letting us recognize her. We had an update from Virginia Peninsula Community College talking about their operation, and in particular their vocational training center in Toana. So excited to have them more in our community. They also approved continuing leasing of a flock camera system for our police department. And those are systems, really these camera systems have been spread across the Hampton Roads localities. And they do read license plates. So as we're looking for a specific vehicle, we're not tracking who's coming and going, but if we're looking for a vehicle on a particular plate, these cameras have been very valuable in tracking that down, helping to solve crime that has occurred in any of our localities in the Hampton Roads area. So again, I think a very good use of technology there. They also accepted $33,000 in various grants for operations throughout the county, and they accepted a resolution which remediated and closed out a Chesapeake Bay ordinance violation. So then they had heard discussion about an overlay district for Forge Road. They've had a lot of conversation over the past 6 to 9 months about the scenic district and how Forge and Road looks and trying to protect that. And it seems to be the simplest path might be an overlay district on some of the larger properties. And so that was really the direction of staff. So that will come back to a future date. And then we've talked about the government center. Our commitment has been, as the government center project, they have awarded an interim agreement, just over $4 million to go through the design and public process of bringing in public input, our citizens as well as our staff, and then coming back with a final cost late this year. Say next fall, but late this year. And so Brad Reinheimer, our assistant county administrator, is providing monthly updates to the board, and we'll have more involvement going forward, but expect those reports on a monthly basis as well. And then the final action they took at their meeting on the 26th was to appoint Ms. Null to a vacant seat that Ms. Sadler had held on the Eastern Region Industrial Facilities Authority. So that is something that is doing industrial development. It allows us to collaborate with other communities and share if we develop something in maybe York County that we could participate in that financially and also benefit financially. So a couple other things ongoing. One, our school, combined school system, we've had some conversation, and just a brief history. A year ago, June 23, the city council indicated an interest in conducting a study to study the feasibility of running an independent school division. That led our board to have a lot of conversation. We had pretty significant concerns over middle schools, because if we separate, the way the contract reads, we could do it as early as the fall of 28. And we would keep our schools, the city would keep the schools in the city. And we would be left, if we were to separate, with a needed space for about 600 middle school students. So our board terminated the contract with the city July 23, asking for a little more time than the fall of 25. We since have an agreement between the city manager and I that if we were to split, and right now the contracts are terminated, so we either have to renegotiate the contract or do something different. But if we were if we were to split, we would not do that until at least the fall of 28. And what that was doing is give all of us time to work through. So again, as the city goes through their process and we go through ours to determine what's in the best interest of the students we serve, I don't think you would see anything physically happen until the fall of 28 at the earliest, unless we thought there was a really good path forward and that could happen sooner. Most likely it would be longer than that. But that fall of 28 would give us the 4 years that if we separated and had to operate an independent system in the county, would give us time to build a middle school student and not yo-yo those kids in temporary spaces here and there. So I think we feel pretty good about where we are at the moment. The city council did present their study, or receive their study, and was presented to city council March 11th. They did hold a community meeting, they being the city and their consultants, March 26th. And what they'd indicated is they would continue to receive input from their residents. And then by the end of this year, we hope to have a path forward of, yes, we'd like to get back together and stay together, or no, we really do want to operate independent divisions. And so I think you'll have a report from us in the May timeframe that will share some information. And I'm sure there'll be some more conversation between here and the end of school over which direction we're headed based on citizen input. So more to come on that. No final decision made at this point. The next thing I'd like to mention is the assessments. We have mailed out 30-some thousand property owner notices about a change in the value of their property or a reassessment at the end of February. And so our real estate division has been extremely busy with calls, really the most we've probably ever received, almost 800 phone calls, 40 plus that have indicated an interest in appealing their assessment to the Board of Equalization, and then 7 or 8 that actually have filed an application to appeal the value. And I certainly would encourage anyone in our community who feels the assessment is overvalued to appeal that value. That's in your best interest, and there is a process for that. By the time, March 29th was a deadline to get to our staff, but you still have till April 29th to appeal to the Board of Equalization. So you could still call and get information on how to get there if you have concerns with your value. What I have seen in most cases, and again, I've had folks whose value increased very significantly, but they bought their house for more than their assessment 6 months ago. And so this new assessment, while a lot more than the previous one, is not as much as they paid for the home 6 months ago. And so I think the assessments in most cases are pretty close to what the market is. And that's where they should be. So if that assessment is very close to what you'd sell your house for, then I think it's going to be right. And it's really on you to sort of prove that it's not. And we will help you through that. It doesn't require getting an appraisal. It requires finding other sales data that would be a home similar to yours that you can show sold for less. And that would give us a way to then help you reduce that value. But it should be close to a market value is where the assessments are meant to be. I think what most people are more concerned about is the impact that could have on their taxes. And again, the board or I don't the Board of Supervisors or myself, we don't have any role in the assessment process. That is driven by the state. That is our staff that does that. They set the value of the home. Where the board does have some value is in the tax rate. We did publish our current tax rate is 83 cents. Our revenue neutral tax rate is 68 cents. In saying that, I say the average assessment increase was around 21%. So if you're above that, even if I go revenue neutral, you still would pay more in property tax. If you're below that and I go revenue neutral, you might actually pay less. So that is the helping the community understand it's a function of value and tax rate. I will share the proposed budget that we put out on the March 29th, holds the tax rate at 83 cents. We are having community meetings that will come up in early April, and I'll list those in a few minutes. And then 10 of those meetings will be for me to explain why I believe that additional revenue is needed. And yes, it is it's 18% increase in overall values for the county, 21% for real estate or for residential real estate. But in terms of revenue for the county, it's about a 10% increase in our overall revenue for the county. So it is a significant increase, but it's not 20% more money other than in just the personal or the real property tax. So explaining that to the community is important. I will try to do that well at these public meetings, and then why we need it. And the big part of why I feel we need most of that revenue is people. Between the school division asking for $5 million and between county staff of trying to make sure our salaries are competitive. And I think we pay people well and our benefits are great. But I can tell you salaries of our mid and upper level staff are not competitive. When I look around us, and we've just completed a pay study, we are significantly behind in a lot of areas, and that will have an impact on us, I believe, long term. And I think we're seeing some of that today. When I look at staffing levels of our 900 or so employees, 5 years ago, I had 127 people in the 10 to 15 year range. 5 years later, that same group is about 71 people. So I've dropped from that being almost 18% of my workforce to 8. I know those are a lot of numbers, but what that means going forward in time, the tenure with the county will be less and less and less, to the point that we just don't have people that have 20 or 30 years working for the community anymore. And that does concern me with that loss of history and loyalty and experience level here in the county, that if we don't address that today, I think that gets worse and worse as we go forward in time. So when we talk about the assessments and what it's generating, yes, it's a significant amount of money. We talked about 18%. That 18% turns into about $21 million, which is a lot of money. And again, that's about a 10% overall increase in our general fund budget. So we will talk more about that at community budget meetings and a podcast that we're doing, or in a week or so, to focus on the budget. But I don't want to miss the opportunity to at least give sort of the budget calendar. As I said, we put it out March 29th. We are holding community meetings April 3rd, April 4th, April 8th, April 10th, and April 11th. The first 4 start at 6 p.m. and the last one starts at 4 p.m. Residents are by district or voting district, but residents can attend any of the meetings that are comfortable or convenient for them or work for their schedule. The presentation will be very similar, with Doug Powell at the Service Authority presenting his budget, myself and our finance director, Sharon McCarthy, presenting on the county side of our budget. We will have our board chair there and a number of board members. So there will be an opportunity for us to at least explain where we are and why we believe this is where the county should go, and then provide an opportunity for the residents to ask questions. It won't be so much about the assessments, although we'll be happy to try to answer those questions. It's more about the budget and why this additional revenue is needed, or maybe more importantly, if we take away some of that revenue and reduce the tax rate, if that's ultimately what the Board of Supervisors decides to do, what kind of impact that has on the community. Will that delay service? When you call for a permit that you want to do some renovation, does it take the 6 weeks or 8 weeks instead of 4 weeks? And is that okay? And maybe the answer is yes. But we are a growing community of population. We are asking for some new positions in the budget. The request was for almost 60. I'm recommending 15 to 20. So I think the need for more positions is still there, but funding wise, what we have is what we can afford. And so that will be what we're trying to do in terms of helping the community understand that and provide really a good opportunity for questions and answers. The budget public hearing happens April 9th. So it's in the midst of those community meetings at the Board of Supervisors regular meeting. Residents can come and just express their opinion on the budget. That meeting starts at 5 p.m. The public hearing will start sometime after that. It's just not a really good two-way conversation. So if you want to ask questions, you can ask them at the public hearing, but that's not the normal place that we answer. And so you're welcome to come state how you feel about the budget and where the county should go. But if you really want a question and answer, it's through our podcast. And later, that's not live, but you can ask questions after that is aired. You can ask it at any of these 5 community meetings that I mentioned. And then the board would take that information they've received from the public, probably have a discussion during their business meeting in April, which is the 23rd, no public comment, but it is open to the public. And then hopefully they would adopt the budget May 14th. And so, as you said, I think the next 6 weeks will be pretty interesting in terms of budget time and the increased values. I will tell you, most of the assessments and people that I have talked to, the values seem to be fair. They just are worried about the tax impact that it has. There are a few that maybe are outliers to that. And I would tell you, as our residential values went up 21%, that is very similar to what happened in York County and very similar to what happened in New Kent. So those pressures are there on values, and I don't believe that the values are far off. But if you think yours is wrong, there is that opportunity, as I said, for the Board of Equalization through the end of April, or April 29th. And Renee, with that, I think I will probably wind it down for this time. I would say I'll give my number of 253-6603, again, 757-253-6603. I am always happy to talk with residents to try to explain things and try to tell you at least why I've made that recommendation. I think this next month we'll talk an awful lot about the budget, and that's certainly to be expected, and the need for additional revenue and where that would go. But I also hope that in the coming weeks, as we go through, it ought to be a really nice time in our community as we transition from a fairly mild winter, I guess. We had a cold week or two to what I hope might be a fairly mild summer. We'll see how that plays. But the spring ought to be a great time, minus the allergies, with things coming back to life, and hope folks will find some time to get out in between the rainfall and enjoy what we have to offer here in James City County. So for this week, that might be it. Anything you think I ought to point out beyond that?
No, I think you did a great job as always.
All right, Renee. Well, good to see you again, and we look forward to next time.
All right, looking forward to it. Thanks, Scott. Well, that wraps up this episode of This Week in James City County. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, please be sure to subscribe. That way you will never miss an episode. And visit our website. We're at jamescitycountyva.gov/podcast. And while there, you'll find all of our shows as well as a form that you can complete, give us show ideas, comments, critiques. We would love to hear from you. So once again, thank you so much, and we'll talk with you next week.